Hello, I'm Todd Ethington. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the National Council of Textile Organizations. I'm joined today by David Costello, the Executive Director of the Warrior Protection and Readiness Coalition. Hi, David. How are you?
Good to see you, Todd.
Great to see you too. We want to take a few minutes today to review a very important piece of legislation that is making its way through Congress at this moment. It's the Homeland Procurement Reform Act. This bill has been a high priority for the Warrior Protection and Readiness Coalition. It's been supported very strongly by NCTO and our members. We're grateful for your efforts on this, David, and everything you've done to get this across the finish line. I was hoping that we could take a few minutes, talk a bit more about what's known as the HOPR Act, what's in it, how people will benefit from it, and appreciate your time today. So real quickly, for folks who haven't been paying very close attention to the HOPR Act, would you be able to tell us what the bill does?
Sure, Todd. Thank you. And again, thanks to the NCTO for being great partners on this effort. We share a number of members, and the textile companies are an important part of the supply chain that make up the WPRC. So really appreciate the great help that we've had from your organization. And this effort started about 4 years ago. We've been moving along, trying to move faster than the speed of government, not always easy. But this is designed to really expand domestic procurement for essential items such as uniforms and footwear and body armor and helmets by the Department of Homeland Security. And this is something we see as essential to try and provide a more stable demand signal to industry here, American industry, so they get to stay in business and be there when needed to support not only the Department of Defense, but other government agencies with essential equipment.
Fantastic. I think the importance of the domestic industrial base was only heightened as we experienced the pandemic. We saw the real needs to have folks who can make things here in the U.S. Grateful that the HOPR Act is poised to help accelerate that and to support that. A lot of folks in NCTO are familiar with the Kissel Amendment, which also has some procurement requirements for the Department of Homeland Security. What additional requirements does the HOPR Act add for procurement at Homeland Security?
That's a great question. And, we actually had worked on the Kissel Amendment with you folks way back in 2009, I believe. And one of the frustrating things, as you know, is the Kissel Amendment got watered down as it went through the process. And we knew this. We were working with the Department of Homeland Security, trying to educate them on the importance of buying American-made product. And they would point to the Kissel Act as already being there to help do that. And to ensure that they could see the error of their ways, we worked with members of Congress and the GAO, who conducted a study on the efficacy of the Kissel Act and trying to promote American manufacturing. It turned out that the Kissel Act has had virtually zero effect. They're buying $100,000 to $200,000 more products that are American thanks to Kissel. Clearly not enough. And we use that as a springboard to try and expand requirements for DHS to be buying American. As you know, the Berry Amendment only applies to the Department of Defense. We would love to take the Berry Amendment and expand it across government, and we will get there someday. But this is an intermediate step, and we use the tools that are available within government regulation, to encourage domestic procurement without saying Berry Amendment in the legislation.
Well, and you mentioned the amount of procurement that's kind of covered under the Kissel Amendment. How much do we expect additional contract values that would be subject to the new requirements under the HOPR Act? What's kind of the universe of procurement?
Well, we expect it to go from $100,000 to tens of millions of dollars, just because of the way that we've written this legislation, with great help, like I said, from our congressional partners. This brings a small business requirement to the table, and that was done strategically because a small business, by definition, has to be an American company. So a percentage of this has to be small business, a percentage has to be American made. And we see this as helping lead DHS in the right direction to try to get to more domestic procurement.
And do you know the size a company needs to be to qualify as a small business?
It varies depending on the type of company that you are. For textile organizations, it can be up to 1,000 people and still be a small business. For other types of organizations, depending on what they do or make, it can be smaller. So I refer you to the Small Business Administration and their guidance on that, depending on the type of business that you are running.
Excellent. I know a number of NCTO members are fairly familiar with some of those designations because of the PPP loans that were part of pandemic legislation that helped ensure that workers got paychecks. So NCTO's able to help you determine if your business qualifies as a small business under this. So please be in touch with us if you have any questions on that. Give us an idea of the types of textile-based products that will now be covered under HOPR.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the highlights of this whole effort started with the fact that we recognized Customs and Border Protection uniforms are made in Mexico at present, have a Made in Mexico label on the back of the neck. And I had a lot of fun bringing a CBP uniform around Capitol Hill and showing members of Congress the fact that CBP officers on the southern border who were there, their uniforms were made at what they were looking at in Mexico, in a factory that's not secured, where they had seen leakage of uniforms disappearing. Not great from a security standpoint. So dress uniforms, combat uniforms, products that go into footwear, products that go into backpacks, load carriage, ballistic armor, all those are textile related, as you know. And we see this as a great benefit to the domestic textile industry and one that they dearly need.
Fantastic. So just a couple quick things to cover as we wrap up here. The first is the HOPR Act was passed by the House of Representatives, and I believe it's been added to the NDAA in the Senate, which the Senate is poised to take up hopefully before the end of the year. Is that about correct? Do we expect it to be passed this year, or what's the prognosis? What's the outlook?
Well, Congress has a way of snatching a defeat from the jaws of victory, but we're as close as we've ever been. The HOPR Act is in the House version of the National Defense Authorization Act. It's in the Senate version of the National Defense Authorization Act. It's heading to conference. NCTO was wonderful in joining us in a multi-association letter supporting the final passage of HOPR in the conference bill. So hopefully they manage to get the NDAA done before Christmas, and we emerge on the other side, and then start to work with you to educate the administration and the Department of Homeland Security on the importance of complying with this new law.
Yes, hopefully we can all have a happy holiday with this getting across the finish line. After it's adopted, how long until it goes into effect?
By the legislation, 180 days after passage. You and I both know from past work together that oftentimes government does not automatically comply. So we're looking forward to working with you, like I just said, to help educate these agencies on what they should be doing.
Yeah, I think it's fairly common to find a bit of pushback when new procurement rules are passed. It's going to take a Herculean effort to ensure this one gets implemented appropriately and followed as intended. Finally, David, there's a lot of interest in our sector in taking advantage of domestic procurement rules like this one. As folks look to have their businesses ready to go to compete for these contracts, do you have any recommendations for what they should do as these new procurements will be coming online, hopefully next year?
Staying close to the Warrior Protection and Readiness Coalition and NCTO, because we'll be sure to be pushing out information on how to do that. We also do know all the contacts at the Department of Homeland Security who are responsible for this procurement, and we would like to engage with them in a formal manner to bring forward all of this great domestic production that is possible. As you know, one of the things we saw along the way is the agency was not familiar with domestic manufacturing like the Department of Defense is. They've lived in a bit of a bubble since the agency was formed 20 years ago. And we all know that we can make great products here in the United States at cost-effective prices. And we're just going to try and connect all those dots so that they can move out as quickly as possible.
That's excellent. David, can't thank you enough for taking time out of your schedule to join us for this important conversation. Thank you and all of your colleagues at the Warrior Protection and Readiness Coalition for your work on HOPR, and we stand ready to help you get this across the finish line and see a new era of procurement at the Department of Homeland Security.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate the time.
Pleasure.